What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Nacho Wrestling. I know, I've been away again, hibernating before this winter has started, sort of in my cryo tank like Bryan Danielson, waiting and plotting for the right time to come back. And speaking of Bryan Danielson, we're going to talk about him in today's video. But before we go into today's video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling. And if this is your first time watching a Nacho Wrestling video, why don't you consider hitting the subscribe button? I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers, and your help would be greatly appreciated. With that out of the way, let's get on to today's video. As I said, we are going to be talking about Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan, whatever you know him as. We are going to be looking at him and Samoa Joe. As you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, we're doing a bit of a versus situation. We're taking a look at both men. We're taking a look at some building blocks, some foundations of professional wrestling, seeing who's better in each category, giving them a point for each round they win. And there's only 5 rounds, so it's a best of 5 series. So if someone runs up the score 3-0, we kind of know who it is at that point. But we will do all 5 rounds just to say that we did all 5 rounds. That being said, let's take a look at what those 5 rounds are. Round 1 is going to be look and presentation. This is a culmination of attire, gear, theme music, gimmicks, nicknames, everything like that. That falls under look and presentation. Round 2 is going to be mic skills and promo ability. This includes, in the ring promos in front of the crowd, backstage interview segments, backstage promos, pre-recorded stuff, anything like that, sit-down interviews, anything talky is going to be lumped in round 2. Round 3 is going to be overall match quality. This one, pretty plain and simple. Don't need to explain that one really at all. Round 4, kayfabe. This is looking more at their in-character achievements. What have they accomplished? What title belts have they won? Who have they beaten? Everything like that. And then round 5, overall legacy in professional wrestling and outside the ring. So with all that explanation out of the way, let's get on to round 1, look and presentation. I would say overall, both men over the years have had a variety of looks and feels to them, with some key elements staying consistent. For Joe, it's the split colored pants, whether they were trunks or the sort of Muay Thai shorts he wears now, or Bryan Danielson with the maroon that is consistent in his gear and has been consistent in his gear since the early days of Ring of Honor, all the way to his final match against Jon Moxley. One thing I will say is that for Samoa Joe, younger Joe in TNA with that Samoan face paint, tribal stuff that they were trying to do for him, was a little weird at times. It didn't always fit him well, especially when, you'd go see his more, not bland presentation, just more serious, more straight-nosed, put-together presentation in Ring of Honor or even CZW. Compare that to what they were doing with him in TNA, kind of deducts a couple of points there. I think I'll give him the edge just because, not edge, I won't give him edge, I will give him the edge. Wait a minute. One thing that Bryan has done a lot is obviously, like I said, incorporate that maroon into his gear early on, way before he was, Ring of Honor World Champion and everything like that. He used to wear straight white gear, or I think it was also some straight blue sometimes, but then he eventually kind of stuck with the maroon color and everything like that. And I think with the gimmick of the American Dragon and just that color, it really works well. It really does. All the logo and brand identity stuff he has nowadays really sticks out as one of the better things that AEW has designed. And whether AEW designed that or whether Bryan had his own creative team design that stuff, who knows? I don't know. But either way, it's some really cool stuff. That being said, I'm going to give this round to Samoa Joe. I like Samoa Joe's look and presentation. I like the nickname, the Samoan Submission Machine. It just sounds so badass. I remember seeing Samoa Joe for the first time in TNA in like 2011, 2012, and I was full transparency watching TNA just for Jeff Hardy. But then I saw Kurt Angle again, I saw Eric Young, I saw Samoa Joe, I saw AJ Styles. I got there right in time to start the Aces and Eights story. So I thought TNA was the fucking shit. And Samoa Joe was one of those guys that I thought was like the absolute best of the best. And I was annoyed that he wasn't like anywhere near the world title while I was watching. And then going back and seeing all the stuff he did later, or earlier on in his TNA days, which we'll talk about, I was like, yeah, this man's fucking awesome. This dude is cool. He's beast. He's been a beast in every company he's in, and the brand and the look and everything like that for Samoa Joe has stayed the same for the past 10 to 15 years. It hasn't changed at all. And that's one thing that I think kind of gives him the edge in this round compared to Bryan Danielson / Daniel Bryan. Because Daniel Bryan is literally the yes man with the like goat logo and everything, like because he's a bearded Billy Goat or whatever WWE called him. And then Bryan Danielson is the best technical wrestler in the world. You know, apples to oranges. Round 1 result. Samoa Joe 1, Bryan Danielson 0. Moving on to round 2, Mike's skills / talking ability. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this round because I am man enough to admit that Samoa Joe is 110% the better guy on the mic. Always has been, always will be. I think Samoa Joe's commentary is even a little better than Bryan's commentary. Just from like a play-by-play standpoint, I think Joe does a better job at actually calling what's going on in the ring. Bryan does a real good job at adding what's the overall story is and everything like that. But the commentary thing of it aside, all I have to do is play that one clip of Samoa Joe eviscerating the 2016-2017 SmackDown main event scene with like Jeff Hardy, AJ Styles, Randy Orton, all these guys. He just lays into all of them individually, and it was amazing. I'm not going to play the clip because then I'd get a copyright, so you know what clip I'm talking about, though. Clip went around Twitter. It still goes around Twitter every so often. Whenever like someone needs, you know, some lame reactions, they just post that and they're like, God, Samoa Joe used to be so good in WWE. What happened in AEW? Round 2 result. Samoa Joe 2, Bryan Danielson 0. Round 3, overall match quality. This is where everyone's best friend, and my best friend, Statistics and Numbers gets involved via cagematch.net. Thanks, Cage Match. This is also where Bryan Danielson starts to make a little bit of a comeback, because, according to cagematch.net, Bryan Danielson is a top 5 wrestler of all time. If you go and take a look at cagematch.net, which, courtesy of me, you don't have to because they're on the screen right now, you can see that Bryan Danielson is the number 4 wrestler on Cage Match. Above him are Undertaker, John Cena, and CM Punk. With Bryan having an overall rating of 9.61, that's kind of hard to beat. And me personally, I thought Samoa Joe was going to be at least in the top 15, top 20. I was surprised when I had to scroll all the way down to 33 to find him. Which, you know, still 33 is nothing to sneeze at. You're still in the top 50. That's great company to be in, to be honest. He's surrounded by a lot of good people. There's just a few people that I am surprised are higher than Samoa Joe, personally speaking. But again, this is all my opinion. A lot of this is my opinion. This one actually is not. This one is literally backed up by stats and numbers because Joe has an overall rating of 9.14. So Bryan Danielson is clearly going to get the win here on overall match quality, but before we move on, I do want to make one interesting note. Samoa Joe fell into the 8 range territory a few times around his career, sort of in 2014, 2012, everything like that. You know, when he wasn't really being used right, or when he was leaving TNA to go to NXT, everything like that. The interesting thing, though, what I'm trying to get to, is that Bryan Danielson only dipped down into the 8 territory once, and it was 8.91. Not even like an 8.5 or anything like that. He was practically still a 9. So, I mean, if you want to get like technical for a second, personally, I don't know why or I don't know how Undertaker is ahead of Bryan Danielson. I could see the case being made for Cena and CM Punk, but good lord, like Danielson easily wins this round. Round 3 results: Samoa Joe 2, Bryan Danielson 1. Round 4, kayfabe. This round is a little tricky for me personally because on one hand, I want to grade the bookers and how the bookers treated the wrestlers over the years and everything like that, because technically, it's not Samoa Joe and Bryan Danielson's fault that they didn't win every single belt for every company they worked for. You know what I mean? It's really up to the booker on who wins the big one and who is their champion at the end of the day. So it's kind of hard to be like, well, his kayfabe accomplishments are better than his kayfabe accomplishments, because they're not the ones dictating that. Now, on the other hand, towards the latter half of their careers, like, you know, now for Samoa Joe and for like 2-3 years ago for Bryan Danielson, they have what some would call pull or politicking power in the backstage area.
Did someone say politicking, brother?
They can sort of get Tony Khan's ear and let him know, hey, I'm a seasoned guy. I've been at the top of the mountain before. Give it to me again. And honestly, I don't think it's because of this politicking power, but both of these guys have been Ring of Honor World Champion. They've been AEW World Champion, respectively, but only one of these guys has been WWE World Champion as well. And that's where I think the edge goes to Danielson again, because he's a trifecta. He's held a world title in every major promotion he's worked for. Now, Joe has as well, because he's been TNA World Champion, but that's like saying you're the BCW World Champion in WWE 2K. Huh? Round 4 results. We are all tied up. Samoa Joe 2, Bryan Danielson 2. Round 5, overall legacy. Samoa Joe is still actively wrestling and almost on a weekly basis for AEW, so much so that he's about to wrestle for the AEW World title at WrestleDream later this month. So I find it a little difficult to place Samoa Joe on a legacy basis because, as dumb as it sounds, and even though he's had a great 20-year career so far, he's still carving out his legacy in this new role as a mentor to younger guys in AEW. Speaking of that resume, let's take a look back at some of the things that Samoa Joe has done in his overall wrestling legacy. He was the first person to make the Ring of Honor title a world title. Bring it all over the world. Defend it in, I think it's 7 countries you have to defend it in for it to become a world title. That's amazing. And he was the man to do it. Yes, Bryan Danielson is one of the longest reigning champions, but he wouldn't be a longest reigning world champion if it wasn't for Samoa Joe. Look at all the great stuff he did in his early days at TNA, the stuff with Kurt Angle. He was the man who introduced Kurt Angle to TNA, their amazing matches together. Oh, cinema. The main event Mafia stuff. I know a lot of people don't really enjoy Samoa Joe in the main event Mafia. Me personally, I always thought he was a good fit. The young Randy Orton type for the older Triple H and Ric Flairs to take care of and groom to take over, and then when he takes over, they, give him the boot. Great idea, but they never really capitalized on it that way. At least I don't think they did. And then later on in his career, his amazing feud with Finn Balor in NXT and his run as NXT champion. And then, of course, now in AEW, he was the go-ahead guy to end that MJF Devil feud. Oof, thank God he was that guy to do that, because if it was anybody else, like, I don't know, Adam Cole as the Devil, I might have stopped watching AEW for a minute. Just being honest. That story sucked. But it's clear to say that Joe is not done yet. He's still carving out that legacy, like I said, so it'll be interesting to see where he places, and maybe in a few years after he finishes up and all said and done, he might have this one beat against Danielson. Speaking of Bryan Danielson, let's talk about his legacy before we decide who wins this round. Like I said, one of the longest reigning Ring of Honor world champions of all time. Amazing feuds with Nigel McGuinness, of course. I'd be remiss not to bring that one up. And then matches and series with guys like Homicide. Other Ring of Honor OGs like Samoa Joe, of course, CM Punk, and Austin Aries, gross. He made history as one of the fastest main roster call-ups for WWE and subsequent firings as well by choking Justin Roberts with a necktie. Some of the great memories of the Nexus are what he did in the first night and then never did anything again until he showed up and was the 7th man for Team Cena at SummerSlam, a big spot for a small young guy. And then of course there's all the stuff he did later in his career, the Money in the Bank with the Big Show, WrestleMania 28 with Sheamus, WrestleMania 30, which he's gone on record saying he really doesn't love that thing as much as we love it. And you know what? I understand. Your body was broken down and everything like that. You didn't feel the greatest. So if you don't want us to revel in that moment, we won't. I understand. Because he had a much greater moment later in his career. But before I talk about that, what else did he do in WWE? He held the WWE title again and put over Kofi Kingston at WrestleMania 35. He was the Planet's champion during that time, and that was fucking awesome. He had an amazing COVID secret banger on SmackDown for the Intercontinental title against AJ Styles, which was the birth of Bryan Danielson in WWE, personally, if you ask me. And then, of course, I'd be remiss not to bring up his matches with Roman Reigns. Literally all of them. I love and remember all of them vividly, and I don't know why. Of course, I just said I'd talk about it, all the memories he made in AEW, crowned and championed by his AEW World title win in All In London in 2024 against Swerve Strickland. A moment and a show that made me cry tears of joy and thank Tony Khan like he was sitting next to me right here in my office. One last thing, I bring it up every fucking time I talk about Bryan Danielson, but I'd be remiss not to talk about how he has a technical wrestling award named after him by the Wrestling Observer newsletter and Dave Meltzer. Samoa Joe simply does not have an award named after him right now. He may have one named after him in a couple of years, or he may already have one named after him from a different publication. But as far as it stands in the wrestling world, the highest honor that someone can achieve for being a technical wrestler is the Bryan Danielson Technical Wrestler Award. That is a legacy. I mean, what other way can I explain it? Bryan Danielson wins. Round 5 results. Samoa Joe 2, Bryan Danielson 3. Well, there you have it, guys. Bryan Danielson is the better wrestler, is the better forefather of Ring of Honor. Were you shocked? Were you surprised? Honestly, I was for a second, because Samoa Joe ran up the score 2-0 when I was typing this out and grading everything. You know, I was genuinely worried that Joe might actually win, because I'm trying to come at this, and hopefully this does well, and hopefully this becomes a good series, but I'm trying to come at this from a very unbiased viewpoint. You know, like the next one, I'm already thinking of doing like CM Punk versus AJ Styles, you know, 2 of my other faves. You know, and just seeing which one, because that one's tough for me too. But this one's really tough because, like I've said in past videos, these 2 guys have really opened my eyes to wrestling, and wrestling can be for everybody and anybody, no matter the size, big or small, everything like that. So I'm trying to come at this from a very unbiased, very centrist standpoint, you know, not trying to lean heavy onto like the Bryan Danielson favoritism or anything like that. And I feel like I did a good job for that during this video. But let me know what you guys thought about this video down in the comments below. Who do you think is the better wrestler? How would you grade these rounds down in the comments below? Would you add an extra round? Would you add something else? Let me know all that stuff down in the comments below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling, and I will see you guys next time.